All right, so today we're going to start our exploration of the human brain. And so, what I want to do is take you through a little bit of the history of how we started to learn that different parts of the brain control different functions in the body. So, we're going to talk about the history this time. We're going to look at what's called split brain theory next time out. And then we're going to divide the brain into a couple of sections. We're going to look at the cerebral cortex, which is where kind of the higher level functions happen, and then the inner workings of the lower brain, and some of those automatic functions, things that you don't have to think about. And so we're going to explore each one of those in a bit of detail. I want to take you. I want you to take a look at the screen here, and kind of look at um, some examples of early brain research. When I was a kid, one of the things I always liked to do or like to learn about was ancient Egypt. I think all geeky kids kind of went through an Egyptology phase. If you are one of those people, you know that you were fascinated by mummies and pyramids too. If you're not, you're like mummies and pyramids. Man, I think I heard about them once. Doesn't matter. But if you know anything about mummies, right, when they were mummifying bodies, they had what were called Coptic jars. And so they would, when the person had died, they would take the internal organs out and put them in these jars that were next to the sarcophagus of the mummy, because you were going to need that stuff in the next life. So there was a heart jar, there was a kidney jar, a liver jar. To show you what they thought of the brain, they sucked the brain out through the nasal cavities with straws and threw it away. Even though they were so dedicated to preserving life, they still didn't have any idea that the brain was what was controlling everything that was going on in the rest of the body. You see this in a lot of different cultures. If you think about our own culture, right? When we tell somebody we love them, we don't tell them I love you with all of my brain. What do? We tell them I love you with all my heart. At Valentine's Day, right? We buy people we love heart-shaped boxes of candy, even though that's not actually heart-shaped. $1 million idea here. You could be the first one to do this. I think we need an anatomically correct heart-shaped box of chocolates. It would be pretty disgusting. I don't know if you've ever seen the heart, but it kind of looks like lasagna that's alive. And maybe have a little button, and then a piece of chocolate comes out of the aorta. If you can make that happen, you don't even have to pay me anything. Just give me credit at your awards acceptance speech. But we talk about the heart, right? All our great love songs. Celine Dion, celebrates Jack and Rose's love with "My Heart Will Go On." That great lyrical poet Billy Ray Cyrus, right? Don't tell my heart, my achy breaky heart. But we don't feel things with our heart, right? Like right now, if you're feeling something with your heart, pause this video and call 911 because you're having a heart attack, right? We're not supposed to feel things in our heart, but that's where we say that emotion happens, right? We tell athletes to put their heart in it, or we look at people and say that person's got a lot of heart. Um, and it's not the same thing. There is actually a part of the brain that deals with that, and we'll take a look. We do get off a little better than some other cultures, though. If you look at like ancient Israel, go to the Old Testament of the Bible, a lot of their feelings took place in their bowels, right? They'd feel things down in the depths of their bowels, which makes those love songs sound a little different, right? Don't tell my bowels, my achy breaky bowels. I'm not sure that turns into a number one hit. And so they would feel them in different ways. Well, as societies advanced, we did get the idea that the brain was important. And you can see in the picture there, this is a head map. And if you can kind of zoom in there, you see each area's got a different picture. This is from a pseudoscience, no proof of any of this, called phrenology. Where basically in the early 1800s, people would read the bumps on your head. And they thought if they looked at this map, they'd feel your head, look at this map, and they could tell why you were having certain problems and things like that. Turned out you may just have an odd shaped head, but there was really no connection between the two. What ends up happening is a lot of what we learned about the brain comes from people who had brain injuries. And then, as scientists, either while they were alive or after they passed away, kind of compared their behavior to what they could see in the brain, then all of a sudden we started to say, well, hey, maybe that part of the brain does this thing. There's a famous patient that had a stroke and had lost the ability to speak. Well, the guy that worked with him, a guy named Paul Baraka, after the guy had died, opened up his brain and looked at the damaged area of tissue and said, well, this must be where kind of language and communication are. And if you take neural anatomy classes, it's called Brocka's area. Now that he's given credit for that. I want to show you one really famous guy. It's this guy. His name is Phineas Gage. Now I'm going to link a couple of cool videos onto the YouTube playlist that is dealing with the brain basics. I encourage you to take a look at those. There is a great one that's going to talk about Phineas Gage and then show you some clips of kind of a TV movie from the late 60s, early 70s they made of this guy's life. It's kind of amusing stuff. But if you look at Phineas Gage's picture there, you can obviously tell on the left side of his face there's something wrong. Well, that's because the stuff on the right side, the top, is actually his skull. That's at Harvard Medical School today. And the bottom is a computer recreation of an accident that he had. You see that long pole that he was holding there? Phineas Gage worked for the railroad, and that's what's called a tamping iron. Basically, when they were going to blow through rock, they drill a hole, put some explosive in, and then they would put this stuff called tamping sand in on top. And you take that and kind of push it down and make sure it was all in there real secure before you lit it. He gets distracted while he's out one day working on the railroad, forgets to put the tamping sand in, and that metal pole collides with the explosive material. It blows up, sends that piece of metal shooting through the bottom of his eye socket, blows out his left eye, and takes out the front left part of Phineas Gage's brain. Now the guys who were here for this accident are expecting to go over and to see a dead body. Phineas Gage is still conscious. There's not even that much blood. We know today that there's not a whole lot of blood in the brain area. If there is, usually it's because of problems. And they take him to the doctor. He eventually ends up coming home. But his wife says that the guy that left for work that day isn't the same guy that showed back up. Gage's personality had changed. He was a darker, less joyous person, fairly profane, easily angered. And we know now from further research that the front part of your brain really does two things. Well, there's a whole bunch of different jobs, but two things we're going to talk about. One is it's your personality. So it makes sense. That left front part of his brain is damaged. And it's also kind of what is helps us inhibit our impulses. So impulse control is there in the front. So it makes sense. You match up his behavior with the damage to this part of the brain. You say, oh, that must be what that part of the brain does. So like I said, check that video out on the playlist. It's a cool one. Today, thankfully, we don't have to blow pieces of metal through people's brains to tell what the parts of the brain do. We have got a lot of different technologies. You see the young lady here in the picture that I've got for you. That is a piece of scanning equipment that measures the electricity that's going through people's brains. You're actually going to take a look at some different types of brain mapping test. And you're going to be familiar with most of them, but just kind of to see what the differences are. There's an activity that you're going to be doing to kind of check that out. And so this is a simple way of telling, kind of measuring the electricity in the brain and what's going on. There are still operations performed today that deal with removing parts of the brain. Those are called lumbotomies. And I've got an example for you on that playlist again of a young man around your age several years ago in Indiana. Actually had to have surgery to remove a tumor from his brain, but he had to do it while he was awake. Because of where the tumor is. It's a really cool video. You get to see actual footage of the brain that's there. It's kind of cool stuff. So check that out. I think that you'll like that. But they talk about mapping the brain. Was this young guy's name's Connor? They pull off part of his skull, and then they use an electrode to figure out what parts of his brain are controlling speech and comprehension and things like that. Because if you're removing something, you don't want to make the situation worse. And so they'll use that a lot of times to kind of figure out, okay, this is, this is what this part of the brain kind of controls. So we're going to look at those. Now, it's tempting to think about this and to say, okay, this is just where this function is. It's more complicated than that. Okay, we're going to look and we're going to kind of say, well, this is the area where this happens. But most of our actions, most of our thoughts are a product of several different brain areas coming together. But it just kind of helps to understand kind of where those pieces are at and how they might work together to form different actions. So check out those videos that are there on the playlist for you. And we will come back the next time and talk about split brain theory, the difference between the right and left side of the brain.